My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 28 years old, and the happiest day of my life became the worst nightmare I could ever imagine. On the night of my wedding, I lost my husband. What everyone believed was a tragic accident turned out to be something far more terrifying. A week later, the man driving the truck finally confessed a secret that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. But before I discovered the truth, I had to survive the heartbreak that nearly destroyed me. The wedding hall glowed with golden lights and endless laughter. Music filled the air while friends and relatives danced around us, celebrating the beginning of our new life together. Standing beside me was my husband, Ethan Parker, the man I had loved for years. He held my hand tightly throughout the evening, as if he never wanted to let go. Every time I looked at him, he smiled back with the same warmth that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. After years of dreaming, planning, and overcoming obstacles together, we had finally become husband and wife. As the celebration continued, family members surrounded us with hugs, blessings, and good wishes. My parents looked emotional, while Ethan's parents couldn't stop smiling with pride. The future seemed bright and perfect. We spent hours taking photographs, cutting the wedding cake, and laughing with friends who kept teasing us about finally being married. Through it all, Ethan stayed close to me, never leaving my side for more than a few moments. Late that evening, after most of the guests had begun leaving, Ethan leaned close and whispered into my ear, "I think it's time we disappear." His playful smile made me laugh immediately. I asked if he was already tired of the party, and he shook his head. "Not tired of the party," he replied softly. "I just want some time alone with my wife." Hearing him call me his wife made my heart flutter. It still felt unreal. We said our final goodbyes and walked toward the car together. The night air was cool and peaceful. As we drove through the quiet streets, I leaned my head against his shoulder and stared through the window at the city lights passing by. Everything felt calm. Everything felt safe. For the first time in months, there were no wedding plans to worry about. No stress, no deadlines. There was only us and the future waiting ahead. "Can you believe we're finally married?" I asked softly. Ethan smiled and reached for my hand. "I've believed we'd end up together since the day we met," he said. "Today just made it official." I laughed and squeezed his hand. At that moment, I truly believed nothing could ruin our happiness. The future stretched out before us like an open road filled with possibilities. We talked about vacations we wanted to take, the house we hoped to buy someday, and the family we dreamed of building together. Then everything changed in a single second. A deafening horn suddenly shattered the silence. Bright headlights appeared from nowhere, rushing toward us at terrifying speed. Before either of us could react, there was a violent crash. The impact exploded through the car like a bomb. Glass shattered around us, metal twisted and screamed. My body slammed forward as pain shot through every part of me. I heard Ethan shout my name, and then darkness swallowed everything. When I finally opened my eyes, I wasn't in the car anymore. Harsh white lights hung above me, machines beeped nearby. My entire body felt heavy and broken. Every breath hurt. For several moments, I couldn't understand where I was or what had happened. Then the memories rushed back, the wedding, the drive, the headlights, the crash. Panic instantly filled my chest. "Ethan," I whispered weakly. No answer came. I tried again, louder this time. "Ethan? Where is Ethan?" My eyes searched the room desperately. Instead of my husband, I saw my mother standing in the corner with tears streaming down her face. My father stood beside her, staring at the floor. The fear inside me grew stronger. "Where is he?" I asked again. "Where's Ethan?" Neither of them answered immediately. My mother's lips trembled as she slowly walked toward me. The expression on her face told me the truth before she even spoke. My heart began pounding. "No," I whispered. "No, don't say it." She grabbed my hand tightly and started crying harder. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. "He didn't survive." The world stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It felt as though every sound around me disappeared. I stared at her in disbelief, waiting for her to take the words back, waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake, but nobody did. Tears filled my eyes as reality crashed down on me harder than the truck ever had. My husband was gone. On our wedding night, only hours after promising to spend our lives together, he had been taken from me forever, and that was only the beginning of the nightmare. The days that followed felt like a blur. Every morning I woke up hoping the nightmare would end, only to remember the truth all over again. Ethan was gone. The man I had promised to spend my life with had been taken from me only hours after our wedding. My body was slowly recovering from the injuries caused by the crash, but emotionally I felt completely shattered. The hospital room became my entire world. Friends and relatives visited every day, offering sympathy and words of comfort, but nothing seemed to reach me. Every conversation sounded distant. Every face looked unfamiliar. The only thing I could think about was Ethan. His smile, his voice, the future we had planned together. Everything had disappeared in a single night. A week later, something happened that changed everything. 2 police officers arrived at the hospital and asked to speak with me privately. The serious expressions on their faces immediately made me nervous. I could tell they weren't there to offer condolences. One of them pulled up a chair beside my bed and explained that they had finally located the truck driver responsible for the crash. The moment I heard those words, a wave of anger rushed through me. For days I had been drowning in grief, but now another emotion emerged. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why my husband had died. The officer explained that the driver had been arrested shortly after the accident, but during questioning he refused to cooperate. He wouldn't explain what happened and barely answered any questions. Something about his behavior had made investigators suspicious. The crash didn't appear as straightforward as they originally thought. Hearing that sent a chill through my body. I asked what they meant, but they refused to share details until the investigation was further along. Before leaving, one of the officers told me to prepare myself because the truth might be far more complicated than anyone expected. That night I barely slept. My mind replayed the crash over and over again. The sudden horn, the blinding headlights, the terrifying impact. The more I thought about it, the more something felt wrong. If it had simply been an accident, why was the driver refusing to talk? Why were the police acting so cautiously? Questions filled my mind until dawn. The next morning, everything changed. The police contacted both my family and Ethan's family. They informed us that the truck driver had finally agreed to speak. Despite my injuries, I insisted on being present. I needed answers. I needed to hear the truth directly from the man who had destroyed my life. Later that afternoon, I was taken to the police station in a wheelchair. The atmosphere inside the building felt cold and tense. Ethan's father sat beside me with a stern expression on his face, while my own parents looked nervous and exhausted. Nobody spoke much as we waited outside the interrogation room. Eventually, an officer opened the door and guided us inside. The man sitting at the table didn't look the way I expected. His face was covered in bruises and cuts. His clothes were wrinkled and stained. He looked exhausted, frightened, and completely defeated. Yet when he lifted his eyes and looked at me, I saw something strange. There was fear there, but not guilt, not regret. It was the look of someone terrified of something much bigger than himself. One of the officers stepped forward and ordered him to start talking. For several seconds, the man remained silent. Then he lowered his head and slowly began speaking. "I wasn't supposed to get caught," he muttered. The room instantly became silent. The officer demanded that he explain what he meant. The driver swallowed hard before continuing. "I'm not just a truck driver." Everyone exchanged confused looks. Ethan's father leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" The man's hands trembled slightly. "I do jobs for money." The officer narrowed his eyes. "What kind of jobs?" For a moment nobody moved, then the man finally said the words that changed everything. "I kill people." The room froze. My breath caught in my throat. My father looked stunned. My mother covered her mouth in shock. Ethan's father stared at the man without blinking. I felt my heart pounding violently inside my chest. The driver looked down at the table and continued speaking. "The crash wasn't random," he admitted. "It wasn't an accident." Tears instantly filled my eyes. Every sound around me seemed to disappear. The officer slammed his hand against the table and demanded answers. "Are you saying someone hired you?" The man slowly nodded. "Yes." A wave of horror swept through the room. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ethan hadn't died because of bad luck. Someone had planned it. Someone had arranged for that truck to hit our car. The officer demanded the name of the person responsible, but the driver shook his head. "I don't know who they are." The officer became furious. "What do you mean you don't know?" The man explained that people like him never dealt directly with clients. A middleman always handled the arrangements. Instructions were passed through a contractor who provided details about the target, location, timing, and payment. The real person behind the job always remained hidden. Ethan's father listened carefully to every word. "Did you ever meet this contractor?" he asked. The driver shook his head. "Only by phone." The officers revealed that they had already attempted to trace the number, but it appeared to be unregistered and impossible to track. Whoever organized the attack had carefully covered their tracks. A heavy silence settled over the room. For the first time since the crash, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't bad luck. Someone had wanted me dead. And somewhere out there, the person responsible was still free. As we left the police station that day, one thought refused to leave my mind. Whoever planned the attack knew exactly where we would be on our wedding night. They knew our route. They knew the timing, and that meant the person behind it wasn't a stranger. It had to be someone close to us, someone we trusted. Someone who had been smiling at our wedding only hours before Ethan was killed. The revelation at the police station changed everything. Before that day, I believed I was the victim of a terrible accident. Now I knew someone had deliberately tried to kill me. The knowledge haunted me every waking moment. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the truck racing toward us. Every time my phone rang unexpectedly, my heart jumped. The world no longer felt safe. I couldn't stop wondering who would want me dead and why. More importantly, I couldn't stop thinking about what the truck driver had said. Whoever planned the attack knew our wedding schedule, our route, and the exact moment we would be on that road. That information wasn't public. It had come from someone close to us. Over the following weeks, the police continued their investigation, but progress was painfully slow. They searched for the mysterious contractor, traced phone records, reviewed financial transactions, and followed every lead they could find. Unfortunately, each trail ended the same way. The contractor seemed to have vanished completely. The phone number used to contact the driver led nowhere. The payments had been routed through multiple accounts. It was as if someone had carefully erased every trace of their involvement before the attack even happened. The police assured us they were doing everything possible, but I could see their frustration growing. They were chasing a ghost. While the official investigation struggled, Ethan's father refused to sit back and wait. Richard Parker was not a man who accepted failure. He had built a successful business empire over decades and was known for getting answers when others couldn't. Losing his son had broken his heart, but it had also fueled his determination. One evening, while we sat together in his study, he looked directly at me and said, "The police may eventually find the truth, but I'm not willing to wait. Whoever did this took my son from me. I will find them." For the first time since Ethan's death, I saw something dangerous behind his grief. It wasn't rage, it was resolve, and I believed him. Over the next several weeks, Richard used every resource available to him. He hired private investigators, contacted former associates, and reached out to people who specialized in finding information others wanted hidden. While the police followed official procedures, Richard's team worked quietly behind the scenes. They examined financial records, communication histories, and personal connections. Nothing was overlooked. Meanwhile, I tried to rebuild some sense of normal life. My physical injuries were improving, and eventually I was discharged from the hospital. But emotionally, I felt more lost than ever. Every room in the house reminded me of Ethan. Every photograph brought fresh pain. At night, I often found myself staring at our wedding pictures, struggling to understand how happiness had turned into tragedy so quickly. The worst part wasn't the grief, it was the uncertainty. I knew someone had stolen my future, but I didn't know who. As the weeks passed, suspicion slowly began creeping into my thoughts. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop analyzing every person around me. Friends, relatives, coworkers, even distant acquaintances. The truck driver had said the person responsible likely knew us well. That meant the answer could be much closer than I wanted to believe. Every smile suddenly seemed suspicious. Every kind gesture made me wonder if there was something hidden behind it. Then one afternoon, nearly 2 months after the accident, Richard called me unexpectedly. "I need everyone at the house tonight," he said. His voice was calm, but something about it immediately made my stomach tighten. "Did you find something?" I asked. There was a brief pause. "Yes," he replied quietly. "I found more than something." Before I could ask another question, he ended the call. The entire drive to the Parker estate felt unbearable. My mind raced with possibilities. When I arrived, I noticed that nearly every close family member had been invited. My parents were there. Several relatives were present. Even my younger sister, Emily, had arrived earlier than most. The atmosphere inside the house felt strange. No one was talking much. Everyone seemed nervous, as though they sensed something important was about to happen. We gathered in the large living room and waited. Minutes later, Richard entered the room carrying a thick folder. His face was cold and unreadable. The conversations immediately stopped. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. He stood silently for several moments before finally speaking. "I found the contractor." A wave of shock swept through the room. My heart nearly stopped. The contractor. The missing link. The person who connected the client to the killer. For weeks, everyone believed that finding him was impossible, yet somehow Richard had done it. Several people immediately began asking questions, but he raised his hand for silence. "The contractor talked," Richard continued, "and everything he told us has been verified." The room became completely still. I could hear my own heartbeat. My mother looked terrified. My father stared at Richard without blinking. Even Emily appeared uneasy. Richard slowly looked around the room, making eye contact with each person one by one. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. The person who ordered the attack wasn't a stranger. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Richard's voice remained steady. "The person who hired the killer is sitting in this room right now." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Every face turned pale. My heart pounded so hard it felt painful. I looked around at everyone gathered there, desperately trying to understand what was happening. Then Richard slowly lifted his hand and pointed towards someone across the room. The moment I saw where he was pointing, my entire world stopped. Weeks passed after the interrogation, but instead of bringing peace, the truth only made my life more terrifying. Every morning I woke up with the same thought in my head. Someone had wanted me dead. The police continued investigating, tracing phone records, financial transactions, and every lead connected to the truck driver. But the person who ordered the attack seemed to have vanished without a trace. It was as if they had planned everything perfectly and then disappeared. The investigation slowly began to stall, and frustration spread through both families. But there was one person who refused to give up, Leon's father. He loved his son more than anything, and he wasn't willing to accept that the person responsible might escape justice. Quietly, he began using his own resources, hiring private investigators and contacting people he trusted. He spent weeks digging deeper than the police could. One evening, nearly a month after the accident, Leon's father called everyone to his mansion. My parents were there. Leon's mother was there. A few close relatives arrived as well. Even my younger sister, Emma, sat quietly near the window. The atmosphere felt strange from the moment I entered the room. No one was talking, no one was smiling. The tension was so thick it felt difficult to breathe. Leon's father stood near the fireplace holding a folder in his hands. His face looked colder than I had ever seen before. Slowly, he looked around the room and waited until everyone was silent. "I found the person responsible," he finally said. The room froze instantly. My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Leon's mother covered her mouth. My father leaned forward in his chair. Everyone stared at him, waiting for the answer we had been searching for. "The contractor talked," Leon's father continued, "and we verified everything. The money transfers, the meetings, the communication records. There is no doubt anymore." A heavy silence settled over the room. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "The person who ordered the attack is sitting in this room." For a second, nobody moved. People exchanged nervous glances, trying to understand what was happening. My chest tightened as fear rushed through me. Slowly, Leon's father turned his head toward one side of the room. Every eye followed his gaze, and then they stopped on Emma, my younger sister. My entire body went numb. "No," my mother whispered immediately. "No, that's impossible." Emma stood up so quickly, her chair nearly fell backward. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You have no proof." But Leon's father didn't flinch. "We have more than enough proof." My father stared at Emma in complete disbelief. "Tell me this isn't true," he said, his voice trembling. "Tell me they're wrong." Emma looked around the room. For a moment, I thought she might deny everything. I wanted her to deny it. I wanted this nightmare to end. But then something changed in her expression. A small smile appeared on her face. Not a nervous smile, not a frightened smile, a cold smile, and at that moment I knew. "Yes," she said quietly. The room exploded with shock. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody even seemed capable of speaking. My mother stared at Emma as if she were looking at a stranger. My father looked completely shattered. Tears immediately filled my eyes as I struggled to understand what I had just heard. Emma wasn't some distant enemy. She wasn't a stranger. She was my sister, the person who had grown up beside me, the person who had attended my wedding and smiled in every photograph. Yet now she was standing in front of everyone calmly admitting that she had arranged the attack that killed my husband. My mother suddenly rushed toward her and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the room. "How could you?" she cried. "How could you do something like this?" Emma didn't react. She simply turned her head back and looked at our mother with cold eyes. My father stood up slowly, his entire body shaking with anger. "Tell me why," he demanded. "Tell me why you would destroy your own sister's life." For a moment, Emma remained silent, then she laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It wasn't even a nervous one. It was bitter, painful, filled with years of resentment. "You really don't know?" she asked. Nobody answered. Her eyes moved toward me. "Since we were children, everything was always about Sarah." My heart sank. My mother shook her head. "That's not true." "Yes, it is," Emma snapped. "Every birthday, every family gathering, every achievement, it was always Sarah." Tears rolled down my cheeks. She pointed directly at me. "She got the best grades. She made friends easily. Everyone loved her. Every time I entered a room, people compared me to her." Her voice grew louder with every sentence. "I spent my entire life living in her shadow." My father looked devastated. "We loved both of you," he said quietly. Emma laughed again. "No, you didn't." The room remained completely silent as years of bitterness poured out of her. You all looked at Sarah and saw perfection. The successful daughter, the beautiful daughter, the one everyone admired. Her eyes burned with anger. And what was I? The second choice, the backup, the disappointment. I stared at her in disbelief. I had never known she felt this way, not once, not in all the years we had spent together. Then her expression darkened even further. And then she met Leon. The moment she spoke his name, I felt my chest tighten. Emma's eyes filled with jealousy. Even then, she got everything. She took a step closer toward me. The perfect husband, the perfect future, the perfect life. My hands began shaking. "Emma," I whispered, but she ignored me. I watched her get everything I ever wanted. Her voice cracked slightly before becoming cold again. And one day, I got tired of watching. The room fell silent. Everyone already knew what she was about to say, but hearing it still felt unbearable. "I didn't just want your marriage destroyed," she admitted. "I wanted your life destroyed." Tears streamed down my face. Emma looked directly into my eyes. "If I couldn't have the life you had," she said slowly, Then I decided you shouldn't have it either. My legs felt weak. I could barely remain standing. So you hired someone to kill me? I whispered. Emma didn't look away. Yes. The single word felt like a knife through my heart. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Leon's father stepped forward. His face was filled with a level of anger I had never seen before. Because of you, he said quietly, my son is dead. Emma finally looked afraid. Leon's father stared at her for several long seconds, then he spoke again. And I promise you something. His voice was calm, generously calm. You will spend the rest of your life paying for what you've done. At that exact moment, the sound of police sirens echoed outside the house. Emma's face turned pale, and for the first time since her confession, fear finally appeared in her eyes. Minutes later, police officers entered the house. The room that had been filled with shock and anger suddenly became completely silent. Nobody moved as two officers walked directly toward Emma. For the first time since her confession, she looked frightened. The confidence she had shown only moments earlier was gone. Reality was finally catching up to her. One of the officers informed her that she was under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, hiring a contract killer, and causing the death of Leon Parker. Emma looked around the room desperately, as if hoping someone would stop them. Nobody did. My mother stood crying near the wall. My father looked broken beyond words. Leon's mother couldn't even look at her. The pain she had caused was simply too great. As the officers placed handcuffs around Emma's wrists, she turned toward me one final time. For a brief moment, I thought she might apologize. I thought she might finally show some remorse for everything she had done, but she didn't. Instead, she simply lowered her eyes. Whether it was shame, regret, or defeat, I couldn't tell. Then the officers led her out of the room and closed the door behind them. The silence that followed felt overwhelming. My mother collapsed into a chair and began sobbing uncontrollably. My father sat beside her, staring at the floor. The daughter they loved had become responsible for the death of an innocent man. No parent could ever prepare for that kind of truth. As for me, I felt completely empty. I had spent weeks searching for answers, believing the truth would somehow bring peace. But standing there, I realized some truths only create new wounds. The following months were difficult for everyone involved. The investigation continued, and every piece of evidence confirmed Emma's confession. Financial records connected her to the contractor. Phone records proved she had arranged the attack weeks before the wedding. There was no longer any doubt. The case moved quickly through the courts because the evidence was overwhelming. During the trial, I was forced to relive everything: the wedding, the crash, the hospital, Leon's death. Every painful memory returned. Several times I wanted to walk away, but I knew I owed it to Leon to stay strong. He deserved justice. His family deserved justice. And no matter how painful it was, the truth needed to be heard. When the final verdict arrived, the courtroom fell silent. The judge sentenced Emma to life imprisonment without the possibility of early release. Some people expected me to feel victorious. Some expected relief. But there was no victory. There was no celebration. Nothing could bring Leon back. Nothing could erase what happened on that road. After the sentencing, I visited Leon's grave alone. The sky was quiet that afternoon, much calmer than the day of his funeral. I sat beside the headstone for a long time, holding the small photograph we had taken on our wedding day. We looked so happy in that picture, so hopeful, so unaware of what was coming. I found the truth, I whispered softly. Tears filled my eyes. I wish it had been enough to bring you back. The wind moved gently through the trees around me. For a moment, I closed my eyes and remembered his smile, his laughter, and the way he looked at me on our wedding day. Eventually, life began moving forward again. The pain never disappeared completely, but I learned how to live with it. Some wounds never fully heal. They simply become part of who we are. Leon's family remained close to me, and together we helped each other through the grief. Years later, when people asked me what the hardest part of losing Leon was, my answer was always the same. It wasn't discovering that someone wanted me dead. It wasn't the court case. It wasn't even the betrayal. The hardest part was learning that the person responsible was someone I had loved and trusted my entire life, my own sister. And that is a truth I will carry with me forever.